Good afternoon. Welcome to P.E.A.C.E. And oh boy, we started right with the two-shot there. Okay. Well, I was sort of hoping to come in over here, but anyway, the ongoing training of our crew, Jay and Lynn. Thanks again for. Okay, cool. Oh, and we have some cool red effects there and everything like that. Thank you. So welcome to P.E.A.C.E. I'm Phil Rheinstein, the founder and host of P.E.A.C.E, Planet Earth Alliance for Creative Evolution. And although those who are watching just got a sneak preview, we have today with us a repeat guest, somebody who's been with us earlier, I guess. What month am I in? It was earlier this year, was it?
Yeah,
okay. Earlier this year, a couple months ago. Miles Lewis, welcome back to P.E.A.C.E, Miles.
Great to be back.
Cool. And I've had a lot of good feedback on the shows that Miles has done on this on P.E.A.C.E, and in our framework of creative evolution, Miles is on the outer fringe, you might say, as far as helping us to open consciousness to other realms, and in particular UFO phenomena, but not limited to that.
Correct.
And editor of Elf-Infested Spaces. Did we bring our copy of the magazine out with us?
All of our copies.
Okay, well it's out there. We'll bring it on soon. And a new issue has just come out.
Number 3, the Summer '95 issue.
Summer '95.
Long overdue.
Long overdue, like the long hot summer we've had. And go ahead and just tell us. Can you guys bring out a copy of that issue? Because I want to actually just like look at it. There's a copy over there. There's a copy over there. Yeah, tell us some of the
new issue.
The highlights.
This new issue is twice as big as the last one, or just about as big, or just about twice as big. The first one was 12 pages. The second one was 24 pages. And this new one is, what's it at, 42 or some such?
42, 38 pages, 39. I guess that makes
that's 40, yeah,
40, yeah.
Including the cover.
Yep.
It has a very huge article called Idiot Stick, Which End Are We On, by a fellow cohort Oneironaut, meaning explorer of dreams and other realms, Jeffrey Lewis, who writes about his conscious dream experiences, which sometimes are waking dreams that he has, as well as lucid dreams where he has utilized his meditative and conscious abilities to maneuver through these weird levels of consciousness that he's interested in, that we're interested in as well.
Cool.
That article is called Idiot Stick, and it's about Whitley Strieber. He personally, Jeffrey Lewis, doesn't think that Whitley Strieber is a very good example of a... He doesn't think he's equipped with the mythological equipment to understand his own experiences. I disagree with that, but I think that what he has to say in that article is relevant anyway, because he analyzes Whitley Strieber's experiences from a dream symbolism perspective and offers some interesting insights into alternative explanations, well, not explanations, alternative interpretations of Strieber's experiences.
No relation, by the way, Jeffrey Lewis.
It's not me. It's not a pseudonym. A couple of people said, "Oh, I like that article you wrote." No, it's not me.
Another Lewis, unrelated.
Yeah, actually, he lives, I think, in Minnesota, and he actually, as he points out in the letters column, he used to live near an ELF facility, and the magazine being called ELF, Elf-Infested Spaces.
ELF standing for electromagnetic?
Yeah, extremely low frequency radiation, but it's also, I mean, several people have come up with extraterrestrial life form, or just because, as Terrence McKenna, who's works, and I think you're somewhat familiar with. He's a millennial prophet who talks about psychedelics being the gateway to communicating with intelligences, and he describes that realm within which close encounters and near-death experiences and all these other related phenomena, he calls them elf-infested spaces. And so the title of the magazine has a double or triple.
And then actually in this issue, there is an article on that very, on elf-infested spaces.
Yeah, I'll continue my article about that now. Hopefully, we've delved into a little in each issue about the electromagnetics angle, and that's such a complicated area, and we're still amassing so much information. I haven't rushed to print too much about it or any detailed accounts, but in the next issue or two, we hope to be including a lot more about ELF and the supposed mind control technology that utilizes that frequency. There's been a lot of literature out that's both UFO and not UFO related, dealing with extremely low frequency radiation, that even if it's just an environmental health issue, is very important because it's something that's probably irradiating us right now. And
right.
We all give off radiation just in forms of radio waves and vibrations from heartbeats and whatnot.
Okay, we'll get back to that. Now, just so we cover the, as far as Jeffrey's article, give us a little introduction into this whole area of mythological interpretation, because that's obviously one of the things that you've been covering in this magazine, as far as just to update those who didn't catch the first interview. One of the reasons we were, P.E.A.C.E. was very interested in what Miles was doing was that he was taking a balanced approach to UFO phenomenon that was not merely a oh my God, I've gotten pulled up in a spaceship and probed with metal objects. Although not to say that's not a legitimate experience some people have. It was also not merely a mythological approach, like this is a chemically induced kind of something that people are more or less a dream, a vivid dream, and he was taking a kind of a balanced approach that is similar to the one we try to take in the show. So the question of how to interpret these experiences becomes more important as we recognize that there is this personal element to them. It's not, the only element, but it's something important.
The mythological aspect, when you start talking about that, people immediately go, oh, so you write it off as just myth or hallucination or folklore. Well, myth and folklore are what we all are ruled by, in a sense. I mean, we're all rooted in our culture and our myths, and in the West, we're rooted in a scientific mythos, and that's where scientific materialism is the science, the church, to which, all experiences can be said, oh, what do you think of this? And right now, they're mostly going, oh, it's just hallucination, or it's mass hysteria, or it's, oh, that's the military aircraft that you saw, or, all this. And all of these play parts, and it's very important. The nuts and bolts approach has been to document sightings reports along the lines of what the object did, what it was like, and in the best cases, finding out how it affected the witness, both during the encounter and afterwards. And Jacques Vallée, who's a noted researcher into these areas, he was one of the first to really vocalize the idea that what we need to be studying is what we can study. We can't get a UFO into the studio and start probing it, or at least, there are claims that the military has done just that,
right.
But those are unsubstantiated, at least at the moment. But in terms of the UFO phenomenon, what we have to deal with is the person who's had the experience. And the people who've had these experiences, when it happens to them, if you imagine it happening to you, what could you do? The things that, the normal ways that people have to respond are to, just force it from their minds, to think, it never really happened, or to not even consciously think it never really happened. And that can create all kinds of problems in their life, and with repressing any kind of emotionally luminous, exciting experience can do. Otherwise, they can either repress it, or they can say they can believe everything that happened for face value.
Mm-hmm.
Silver-suited beings came to the wall and started doing things to them and telling them things in their mind like, we're not here to hurt you. This is for the benefit of our race and your race, or whatever they happen to tell the witnesses. They've told us, I haven't had the experiences, but they've told the researchers through the experiencers that they're here for any number of reasons, or that they're here from any number of places. And so if the person can either take that literally and then deny any other encounter where the beings told somebody else that, oh, well, they said they were from Venus. Well, mine told me they were from Mars.
Right.
Well, mine says they were fairies, whatever. They can either just accept that or, and I think this is what I hope and I believe I've seen started to happen, is people are opting to think in a new way, to go, well, I'm suspending judgment because there's just not enough information. A number of people I know who've had the experience and who take the time to write about it or to do art that's inspired by it, to reflect on it, they're pretty much left with an open-ended, ambiguous acceptance of it. Mm-hmm. Now, if they're having the traumatic experiences like medical examinations and so forth, that can be really hard to do. And I'm not here to recommend what's the best way to do it, but the mythological aspect, everything happens within your own mythological context. And like I said, if a religious person can, see a vision of what they consider the Blessed Virgin Mary, but if you look at across the boards all these apparition reports of Blessed Virgin Mary's, BVMs as they're called, Men in Black, MIBs, BHMs, big hairy monsters, Bigfoot, Loch Ness Monster, UFOs. The apparitional literature really does fit, interestingly, with UFO literature. Now, there are people who are convinced then that it's all hallucination, and then they can also invoke the mythological context by saying, well, see, this is inspired by their own unconscious and so forth. And I'm not denying that. I think that if you look at all the reports, the narratives, the folklore, the literature, the stories that people tell of what has happened to them, you'll see that there is a similarity with all these things. And Jeff Lewis, has done his reading in terms of the Bible and mythological overtones of that. And another early researcher, a really good book, Angels and Aliens, UFOs and the Mythic Imagination by Keith Thompson, was an excellent introduction to the UFO phenomenon because, on the one hand, he was chronicling the history of the modern era, 1947 on, and then also reflecting on the past and if any of these other experiences from history have relevance. In between all that, he talked about the mythological context, and he talked about the elements of the trickster, the elements of Hermes, and the element of, I believe it's Dionysus, and other mythic archetypal personas that were evident within the UFO phenomenon, both in the characteristic of the entities reported as well as just the field itself in terms of the backstabbing nature of certain UFO researchers and how they're always slandering each other, and it's like the gods warring amongst themselves.
Right.
And but Jeff Lewis sets up some interesting ideas. He believes basically that this force is a negative force, and that it is the force of the Sky Father and the Earth Mother, and the ideas of the Holy Church. And he describes how basically when these experiences were happening, Strieber was rebelling against both that church, the Holy Mother Church, and also looking to expand his consciousness. And he sees these forces, these aliens, these visitors of his, Jeff sees Whitley Strieber's visitors as basically the emissaries of the kingdom of the Father, who are coming to smite thee back into place and say, look, you don't have a spiritual essence that you can co-create reality with, and therefore Jeff Lewis's whole approach is to reclaim that holy power of the psyche and of creativity, and to use it the way we should, or the way we are destined to evolve to.
So does he feel that therefore Strieber's experiences were unreal in the literal sense of the word? Or
I think Jeff would say that to a degree because his experiences he recognizes as being in the mind.
Right.
But once again, if any researcher who's worth his weight has done the reading in the metaphysical literature and the quantum physics literature and seen that we pretty much know reality is an illusion, and that might sound trite and new agey, but that's just the way it is, at least in this new paradigm.
Right.
And the new paradigm isn't the end all, just like science wasn't the end all.
Right.
But I think he mostly sees it as being the mind, but what is the mind and where are its limits? I haven't seen their limits
Well
yet.
said, yes. I think that's a good point. Where does the mind end? Just to make the connection also, I met you through Tom Mellett, who's very interested in the mythological aspects.
As well as their connections to physics.
And in this case, we're dealing with, he has some very specific mythological interpretations, which are, in other words, he could be called a literalist within the Jeffrey could, literalist within the mythological realm. In other words, that he's believes there's maybe a correct way of interpreting certain phenomena, this kind of thing.
When Jeff speaks, he's always speaking with conviction. And as Robert Anton Wilson has said, convictions create convicts. I personally, and this is, I think, our Gemini nature here, I tend to straddle the fence and, take both sides. I've not been swayed to believe wholeheartedly in any one theory. I have what feels most real to me, and Jeff has what feels most real and believable to him. And I just got a letter today from a friend who publishes with the Excluded Middle from California, and he was responding to an article or two in ELF, and he mentions Jeff as being, he says, I hope Jeff doesn't think that his ideas are the end all, because if it's when you stop, belief is the death of intelligence. As soon as you believe something, you stop critically thinking about it. Now, there's a lot to be said about experience, and Jeff seems to have had a lot of experiences, but most of his, even when they seemed physical to him, he was able to go, well, I know enough about the psyche to know that there's that fine line between mind and matter, and I think it's pretty blurred personally.
Right. Well, let me just also say that in a certain way, when you're dealing with this phenomenon or the psychological aspects of UFO experience, in a certain sense, what you were bringing up at the beginning is you're dealing with the issue of any experience you've had at all that's not right now, because you're dealing with the whole issue of memory. You're dealing with the issue of what unites a particular person's identity. In other words, how do I know this experience is real? So if we say, take an experience, I ran into this person or had a particularly intense encounter with some other person. How do I know that experience was real? How do I deal with that experience and what that means for me? And I think that's what struck me about the group you talked about, that you had a group that was meeting regarding this, is that part of it is just processing intense experiences, which is, I think, has been a big thing over the last particularly 5 or 10 years, is people processing traumatic experience of any kind, whether incest or rape or various other things that have kind of come out into the public that were before then people were not wanting to deal with.
Yeah, it definitely is about coming to grips with these. When you have an experience that's so utterly outside of your range of normal experience, what do you do? If it's really strange, you don't tell anybody except maybe your closest loved one, and even then, I know there's lots of people who are hesitant to tell their husbands or their wives about their experiences. It is all about coping, or at least it has been in recent times. The whole, like you said, the whole victim market that sprung up in the 80s and now in the 90s, the self-help thing has been really big. That's why, in a sense, the group that we've been leading has become less of a support group. We're still supportive, but it's become more of just an alternative UFO group. There already is a UFO meeting group here in Austin, and they'd always love to have you, Austin MUFON, but the group that we had became less and less a place where they could voice their really deepest experiences, because we pretty much have to keep it open to the public. And I still think there really needs to be that kind of supportive environment. I'm going to do my best to keep that going, because there's plenty of people in Austin who've had these experiences who could meet with these people on a private basis and tell them what they've experienced, and at least that can have some resonance for that person. The group, though, has just become more of a a place to hear about the latest, talk about the latest, and come to terms to it in that way. I think that's what doing shows like this is all about, is helping the populace know that these aren't so strange, and that you've probably had a strange experience that may not be called an abduction or may not be called a UFO sighting, but it's probably pretty weird and probably involve what's called psychic or paranormal phenomenon,
Right.
which seems to be intimately linked to these phenomena.
Right, exactly. I just because you were talking about it, I had an experience just 2 or 3 days ago where a guy across from Discovery Incubator, where I've been working, some guy was walking his little, like a dog, a kind of a small, more like a home dog, and some big, what are they called, Rottweiler, this kind of dog, came from in the neighborhood and just started attacking this guy's little dog. And it was a very intense experience because, it was in that dream-like quality. It was like, all of a sudden, it was like we were watching, it was from across the street, and then slowly people started running over, but in the meantime, these two dogs were going at it. The big dog was obviously, getting the better of this little dog, and apparently there was a woman with a baby nearby, and this dog didn't belong to anybody. It was just from the neighborhood, and the experience had that quality where at the time I was experiencing it. It was almost like time gets compressed is the feeling that happens there. It's like all of a sudden everything slows down and you're watching something and it seems kind of dreamlike. And eventually a bunch of us went over, and I went over and confronted this dog. But then when I thought about it afterwards, I realized, God, here I was like confronting this Rottweiler, and like if it had been in a different mood, it could have been a very dangerous situation.
Yeah.
But again, within my own experience, this whole thing was like I just had to kind of file it away. It took me like a day or two to get over it. It was in my consciousness for a day or two. And I think there's just that whole issue of dealing with things that we have, particularly in our culture. You get the job, you get the house, you get the car, you get all these things that are relatively stable, and something comes and disturbs it and comes out of the ordinary, and it's very difficult. We don't leave time for that. We don't leave time for the out of the normal situation. That's not figured into the salary. That's not figured into the and now of course it's come in the back door. That there's sick leave, and there's changing jobs, or there's things that people do that are but still we don't leave room for that. And then when it comes, it's very disturbing. It's very hard to.
Like you said, there's not time for that, that's what a lot of people report is missing time, or when they have these experiences, it seems like either lots of events happen in a short amount of time, more so than it should have been possible, or that they were gone for a lot longer and they don't have hardly any memories of any time at all. The time from what we can read, seems to be a function of consciousness, and that's as you're obviously in an altered state when you're perceiving this, because that's such an out of the ordinary event. It's like you're in a car wreck, or even if you just have a near miss, you're driving to work and you're in an altered state of consciousness probably anyway, driving on autopilot, and suddenly you're jarred out of that and into a seriously altered state where endorphins might be flowing through your body, or any number of factors could be contributing to cause you to perceive reality differently, and that the time function is very much a part of that, and it's so much in UFO encounters. There's this sense of an altered state of consciousness where time slows down or speeds up, or it just suddenly there's quiet.
Right.
It's as if there's a vacuum around the incident, and the closest I've come to having a UFO sighting, I think I mentioned on the show, was a hoax that my friends at the Excluded Middle perpetrated, and it was welcome after the fact. During the incident, it was really wild because I looked up and saw this green light doing things in the sky that it shouldn't be doing,
Right.
and I was like, guys, and I immediately heard their, oh my God, chiming in.
Right.
And so I knew that it wasn't just me, that they were seeing it too, but that was just about as scary as just me seeing it. And I remember, you know, sitting around the campfire can put you in an altered state anyway.
Yeah.
And we were telling, you know, UFO stories because we were a bunch of UFO fanatics. And then suddenly to see this light, and it was really, I had the feeling that time expansion, like, you know, things are going really weird, anything could happen. And that was a really frightening sense.
Yeah.
I mean, I wasn't really afraid that we were going to be abducted, but the thought that in my mind was like,
Yeah.
wow, that light could come down and become, you know, a being, a craft, or just remain a light, and, you know, we might black out and come to later on, or who knows, anything could happen. And I really felt like anything could have happened. As it wore on, it stayed around a while. And
Then you realized
we
it was
realized,
like a spotlight or something.
yeah, it was, I won't give the details, but it was a very clever little hoax that my friend had perpetrated on most of the people there. And it was really interesting now to be able to look at that and to see, wow, I was not prepared for that at all. You know, everybody I've told it, they were like, oh, did you get a picture? And I was like, well, I had a camera, but I didn't take a picture, and my video camera wasn't working. Yeah, it electromagnetically messed with my camera. I couldn't get a picture. No, actually, I think it was the ruins, the Mayan cliff dwellings. And I started taping the Mayan cliff, not the Mayan cliff dwellings, the Gila, New Mexico cliff dwellings.
Right.
The camera went out. So I figured, I'm not supposed to take that.
Right.
It's okay.
That's very interesting that there was actually there's some humor in the UFO community.
There needs to be.
Yes.
So much of it is so, you know, they're real, damn it, and the government knows it, and, you know, they're keeping the truth from us.
Right.
Which, you know, there's been lots of coverage lately of the whole Roswell supposed autopsy footage, and everywhere I go, you know, it's like, so, did you see it? What'd you think? And everybody's looking for some pronouncement. And, you know, basically, your guess is as good as mine.
Right.
You know, I have what I feel, and I think it's probably more human than anything, but I certainly wouldn't rule out that it could be an alien.
Right.
I wouldn't rule out that it could be a fake either.
Right. This was the footage. By the way, I didn't see this. I did see some news reference to it. But I never got to
CNN
see
had a blurb about it, I hear.
about it. They found the footage, and did they actually show it? Did you actually see
The
it?
autopsy, there was I guess it was in the time block for either sightings or encounters, and they showed it, where they showed clips, you know, tantalizing, quick-cutting clips of it, because that's all they could afford.
Right.
But it was, I don't know, I thought it was pretty gruesome.
Right.
I was pretty convinced that it looked pretty real, but on second viewing I was like a little more skeptical. But I knew going into it that, for me, the validity or the reality of this phenomenon does not rest on any one case, any one photograph, any one piece of evidence.
Right.
There's just too much out there to rule it out, and or to convince me of one theory or another.
Right.
I mean, I think Roswell is a pretty dubious case in and of itself. It's very intriguing. That's for darn sure.
Yeah. Okay. Well, we're guess
over the place.
Yeah. Well, that's what we love to do here. I wanted to. Well, first of all, when you were talking about that other thing, we were talking on a show recently about the whole issue of prediction, because we were talking about astrology and what that prophecy and how that works. I noticed there was a thing in here on he mentioned the word mantic, because that's related to the word for prophecy. Nisargadatta has said that the unexpected is where reality exists, and that was, you know, kind of, you know, just to quote you back on that. In a sense, some of these experiences, again, are tapping into what it means for each of us to encounter something unexpected that is not what we are normally living out, and so on. Is that element of the unexpected, is that eventually, I guess the thing that's interesting about the whole way that the UFO thing has unfolded is that it becomes actually the people who get very involved in it, eventually it becomes what their reality that they are, you know, the way they see the world, kind of thing.
You're calling us obsessive.
No, I would.
Well, I certainly think that, because I believe that the nature of the encounter, the close encounter, the encounter with an apparition of Blessed Virgin Mary, whatever, whether you call them aliens or angels, there's a numinous quality. There's the quality of the fantastic, and that's what sets these apart from normal experience. And what was your question again?
Well, what I was going to say is, by the way, the word numinous, the use I'm familiar with it is numinous is actually referring to a quality of being or experience as opposed to something outside. So my question is, do you, by becoming to expect a UFO phenomenon, do you mess with its unexpected quality, with its, or is that something? I mean, you're kind of answering the question by saying that the experience has a quality which is beyond expected or not expected. It's just something that is a vivid experience in a sense. That's how you know that this is something.
Well, yeah, I basically I've come to call them encounters with the fantastic because if you look at literature, there's a whole type of literature called the fantastic, and it has to deal with those areas that are between unreal and real.
Right.
I mean, most people know when they've had a dream, though. When you're in the dream, you're pretty hard pressed to become conscious and go, "I'm in a dream."
Right.
And these experiences have that fantastic quality, even though they can also be they can seemingly be very simple and absurd.
Right.
I have a photograph in there of a rural gentleman who's a chicken farmer in the '60s named Joe Simonton, and he was, in his shack one day and heard a sound outside, and he went and looked, and there was a saucer sitting outside his shack. And he noticed some beings inside in silver spacesuits doing something, and they handed him a jug. So he assumed they wanted water. He went and took it and got some water and gave it to him, and he noticed they were like cooking on some kind of griddle. And they took the water and they gave him some of what they were cooking, which were these pancakes. They gave him 4 pancakes. And the Air Force examined them. Another organization got one, but basically they found they were completely terrestrial, except that they lacked salt. And the only significance that might have, perhaps, is
they forgot the salt.
They forgot the salt, or that in the fairy tradition, the fairies don't like salt, and one of the ways of protecting against them is, I believe, a ring of salt. Anyway,
take it with a grain of salt.
Take it with a grain of salt. A friend of mine from the excluded middle, he's just sent me an article today where he examines that case, and he looks at he kind of examines it from a hermeneutic or a symbological Jungian perspective, and talks about the word, the meanings like Joe, the everyday Joe, and Simonton, meaning, was it Jesus, the patron, Simon. And so it's kind of representative of the church, and the everyday common man, and the church going common man, and town is town. And anyway, he talks about all these symbolisms, and it does have that whole story. And there's no reason to doubt this old guy. I mean, you could just say, oh, he must have been making up a story, but he seemed as genuinely perplexed as anyone.
Right.
And it has the flavor of these old, the tales of entertaining angels unawares. You never know. You might as well be nice to a stranger because you never know. It might be an angel.
Might be a pancake.
They might give you a pancake. And he also talked about Pan, and it was though this man represented the everyday Pan. The spirit of nature and so forth was embodied in that. In this cake, this wafer, this communion.
Oh
wafer,
man, that's beautiful.
But then there's people who would just scoff at all that and go, "Oh, it's just coincidence," and that case probably doesn't mean anything anywhere. It wasn't real, but it's real.
Right.
And I think that's really what the people who've have these experiences come away with is what is real. The only weird experiences I've had that even compare are false awakenings or dreams of UFOs, but in all those cases, I mean, I may have been convinced within a dream that they were happening, but there wasn't any question to me that they were ever anything more than just dreams.
Right.
But then again, I would entertain the possibility that if there are intelligences out there, they could use certain states of consciousness as communications channel. I also think that the human collective unconscious, or perhaps the consciousness of the planet or other species on this planet, might be using these same methods of communicating with us. Maybe in these altered states where we're open to more sensory input or
Yeah.
different types of sensory input, maybe that's where these messages are
You
coming
go into a trance for 6-8 hours a day, lie down, you know, and
What are you doing?
What are you doing during that time? But I guess the other thing that's being developed is in the same way that Einstein's theory of relativity was actually not a theory of relativity at all. It was a theory of explaining relativity so that you could have a theory that was not relative. In other words, it wasn't, you know, the theory was meant to actually cover all the phenomenon rather than it's not like, well, the theory applies over here, but it doesn't apply over here. Similarly, it seems like that especially through the people that you're associated with, that the UFO phenomenon is an opportunity for people to come up with a paradigm of how to view the world that incorporates the unexpected, that doesn't see it as threatening, that doesn't, however, buy into it in a kind of a naive way, but at the same time, you know, kind of plays with it a little bit.
Yeah. The people I'm in communication with, they do have a sense of humor. They're not out to find the truth per se. They're all looking for gnosis. They're all looking for, you know, insight,
right.
knowledge, but they don't expect to find the truth.
Right.
And that's a big difference between us and them. I mean, to put it that way.
Right.
I mean, there's a lot of people out there, you know, who follow, you know, the X-File motto, which is the truth is out there. Well, I'd
Right.
say either it's just, they mean it's out there, meaning it's pretty weird, or
Beyond
you know,
belief television,
yeah.
remember, that's our motto.
beyond belief. And it's just the suspension of belief and the
Right.
suspension of disbelief. It's just the excluded middle.
Mhm.
My friend's
That's the
magazine
name
title.
of the thing.
It doesn't have to be an either or choice. You don't have to be, you know, to believe in extraterrestrials or believe that it's all bunk. I mean, there are other options, and I think that's the most interesting thing is a multiplicity of possibilities.
Mhm.
The rest of
We gotta cover this article on Poe because this is what this whole thing is all about.
yeah, Poe logic.
Poe logic.
You know, it doesn't mean
you
you don't have any money, so you have to struggle around with Poe logic. Yeah, that was my introduction to that was Robert Anton Wilson. He's a great introduction to so many things,
Mhm.
and
That was his word that he coined?
well, no, it's a French psychologist, philosopher. It's in the issue.
Psychologist Edward de Bono?
That would be him.
That would be him.
He coined the term Poe to describe a type of logic that's more like creative brainstorming than Aristotelian either-or dualistic thinking. It basically allows the possibility for you to insert a Poe, P-O, between any two things.
It's like a wild card, basically.
Yeah, it's
I
like
like it.
this and that, and you take two things that don't seem to have any connection whatsoever and try to think of what connections they might have, and it's supposed to free up your thinking. And well, in his book, I believe it was Cosmic Trigger 1 or 2, he said, he mentioned UFOs, Poe this, or a number of different things.
So you can just put the word Poe, that in his scenario, you just put the word Poe and then anything else, and
yeah, something
like
Poe
a-
something.
oh,
And,
cool.
you could say such and such in light of this, you know.
Right.
And one of the ones he said among many was UFOs, Poe rabbits. And I was like, what the heck? UFOs, Poe rabbits. What validity could that have at all? And well, I read on, and he talked about there's a really interesting researcher named Martin Kottmeyer who he's probably considered a debunker by most. But what he does is, I think, legitimate research. He looks at science fiction and just other literature of the times to see how people's narratives about their experiences might have been unconsciously influenced by exposure to those. He talked about how Betty and Barney Hill, the first well-known American abductees who had their experience in the mid to late 60s, it took a couple of years before the suppressed trauma reached enough level that they sought professional help and ended up going under hypnosis and describing these experiences that predate, the modern tales of short, big-headed, black-eyed alien greys.
Right.
And he pointed out that in the interim between the encounter and the hypnosis, and I believe it was the hypnosis section that uncovered the description of the beings. I don't believe that happened. I don't think they had described it before then. There had been an episode of The Outer Limits in which there were some aliens who communicated with their eyes. And one of the lines straight out of Barney's hypnosis tapes is they're communicating with their eyes. They're talking to me with their eyes, and it's pretty haunting. Now, they could have seen that.
Yeah.
And that's not to say that it's all imaginary. That's just saying, look, we need to look at how culture both consciously encountered and unconsciously encountered, and perhaps collectively unconsciously encountered, might have influenced that. And Cottenmeyer goes to great lengths to show these sources. So that likens him as a debunker to most, but I think he's just a good researcher. Anyway, he apparently started an organization called MEBON, M-E-B-O-N, which I think was a jest on MUFON, M-U-F-O-N,
Yeah.
Mutual UFO Network and Mutual Easter Bunny Observation Network. And that sprung from his thought. There's like two camps of people who believe that UFOs stem from some form of the unconscious. Either some of them, the literalists just think that it means that it's all hallucination and it's just springing from the mind. The other, what Robert Anton Wilson terms the surrealists, consider the idea that psychokinetically, through the powers of the mind, we physically manifest these things, and that's how they're able to leave markings and landing traces and radar returns, and perhaps photographic evidence. Apparently, MEBON was set up to explore these possibilities because they figured, well, if this is true, then there should be sightings of the Easter Bunny, or Santa Claus, sightings of Elvis. But anyway, they focused on the Easter Bunny, and they didn't really find any real hard and fast Easter Bunny encounters. But what they did find was a surprising number of correlations between UFO sightings and close encounters and rabbits. And those ranged from a French encounter where a farmer or a man came outside and saw a landed UFO and these little entities grabbing the chickens from his hutch and putting them in, or not chickens, rabbits from his hutch and putting them in the vehicle. And then there's other tales of Bud Hopkins, who's a pretty well-known abduction researcher. And one of his abductees talked about seeing hundreds and hundreds of rabbits beforehand. And then there's a number of cases where people have been out hunting rabbits when they saw a UFO. There's even a case where somebody encountered an egg white-shaped UFO and then saw, like rabbits across the road.
Right.
Now this, might all be written off as coincidence, but, coincidence and synchronicity are all in the eye of the beholder.
Yeah, exactly.
So they found all these conjunctions with these UFOs and rabbits, and they just thought, well, that's kind of strange. And I was just like, well, that is pretty odd. Immediately after reading that, within 2 weeks, I met somebody who I was a coworker who revealed to me that, lo and behold, she had a UFO sighting some years back. And it turns out she had this UFO sighting when she was like 13 or so in Middlesex, Connecticut, or is it Massachusetts? Anyway, that upper area, and she was putting her rabbits away for the night, turned, and saw an egg-shaped UFO above an oak tree in her yard. Well, first of all, it's interesting that her age, 13, rabbits, oak tree, and an egg. I mean, those are all fertility symbols. Mm-hmm. And her sister was also present during the sighting, but didn't apparently witness it because she was so frightened by her sister's reaction who was seeing it.
Right.
And she had already heard tales of what UFOs do because her older brother had told her about his sighting and encounters, and so she was just convinced that they're here for me. So she rushed her and her sister inside the house and tried to get somebody's attention. At which point it moved across the yard and towards the highway, and, as she says, disappeared in a purple flash.
Right.
Now, what the heck do you make of that? I mean, was it just a coincidence that there was a balloon that she thought was illuminated? Maybe the sun was behind it. I don't know. And it was just a coincidence that it was over an oak tree and that she was putting her rabbits away and that she was 13 at the time. Is that all coincidence, or is it synchronicity? Does it mean anything? Or, is it an IFO that she misidentified, or is it a legitimate manifestation of the phenomenon? Or was it, a military craft that was observing her? Well, why the hell would it be observing her? It just boggles the mind.
Sounds like a William Faulkner novel or something.
It I think frees up the mind. I mean, a lot of people would say, well, that just doesn't lead anywhere, so what's the point? Well, I don't know. I think, if anything, it just kind of helps you open your mind to different possibilities, and that's what Poe seems to be about.
That's what Poe is about. Whoa, that was a little tear. That was we got Poe. We got
That's
it.
Poe.
We experienced it right
It's
there.
the Poe man's
Poe, yeah, and you went right into it. I think the other thing is that just because I feel like I have to hop in on that whole question of the surrealists versus the other ones, is that I would say it was neither one. I would say that rather than it being a situation where we are actually creating the phenomena out of our own mind, or the phenomena are actually real and we're just experiencing them, there's something in between there which is more like a substrate of archetypal energy, that where those things are just moving through in parallel to each other. We can't. It's not necessarily a causal phenomenon where it's something that they just coexist with each other, that they travel in the same circles, you might say, that they're archetypally symbols of fertility and rabbits, and maybe the fertility of the imagination as expressed by this concept of Poe,
Right.
Might travel in the same circles, and particularly for someone who's attuned to it, it would be in the same thing. We talked about this in astrology, because the outer planets were discovered synchronistically at the same time that certain phenomena were happening in history. So Uranus was discovered when the French Revolution and the American Revolution, and electricity was discovered, and the meaning of that planet as it orbits around our solar system is very much related to electrical phenomena, and to the point of being very literal, where people have Uranian transits or whatever, there are earthquakes that happen, or there's an electrical, lightning storm that happens on a particular transit. And so the question is, when people say, is that caused by the planet, or is it...
Or is the planet just a way of chronicling?
Chronicling, that might
that's
be
some cycle that we don't know what the mechanism
exactly.
is.
And then the way I describe it in my own theorizing, it would be that it corresponds to an element that's within all of our atoms and all of the stuff that the whole thing is made out of, and that we're just, by observing it's just something that happens to be far enough away from us that we can observe it, and that it has a regular period, and we can see it somewhat objectively, and can observe a phenomena that otherwise, if we're just watching our own experience, might be difficult to separate out. But it's just a piece of the same kind of cycling and unfolding that's going on everywhere at every moment. So that, what do you call that theory? Is that the...
I don't, the cyclic UFO manifestation theory? I don't know. There was a really good article.
The Gemini will always come up with something.
There was a MUFON article not too long ago about UFO cycles. There's been a number of researchers who've noted different cycles. There's one that was a 3-month cycle, and there was one that was the 7-day cycle, which was basically there are more UFO sightings on Wednesday.
Wow.
Go look.
Wow, it's today, man. Whoa.
And certain times...
Look what happened behind us.
Certain times of year, there'll be these things. Basically, there does seem to be cycles, and what this article was talking about is you get bigger cycles when all these little cycles coincide.
Right.
What they haven't been able to correlate these cycles to anything. One of the first cycles they recognized was that there seemed to be an increase of UFO sightings when Mars got closest to Earth. Of course, the extraterrestrial proponents immediately said, that means they have alien bases on the moon, and so they're able to come here more then.
On Mars, you mean?
On Mars.
Yeah.
And so that's one interpretation. There's the other interpretation that, there's just, if Mars is closer, there's more people who can misidentify Mars as a UFO.
Right.
But it's probably a combination of both and something else that we don't even understand. I do think that there's a substrate that's been with us forever, and that it does have a cyclicalness. And there was a researcher who's tangentially researching UFOs who wrote about, he did astrological charts for people who'd had near-death experiences. And lo and behold, the days they had their near-death experiences was considered a day of transition, a day that would have great significance for them. Go figure. What does that mean?
Right.
Did the planets cause their near-death experience? And I think there's been a number of researchers who've looked at the hermeneutic and the symbolic and nature of certain encounters, and there's like in the Pascagoula, Mississippi case, there were these fishermen on a pier, and a UFO that was kind of shaped like a football, but as they described, kind of also shaped like a fish. And the door that opened up, they said, opened like a fish's mouth. And there's the beings that came out had claws. And the time that the sighting happened, like I believe there was a very aquatic, fish-oriented constellation, and in a certain part of the sky, and just all these conjunctions of things. But then there's another researcher who says that was a case of Soviet psychotronic experimentation.
Or maybe they just had too much beer and they were looking at fish or something.
So I think that you can find that this phenomenon has been with us, and so it is kind of the substrate. And I think that we need to really examine all these different experiences, whether they be what some people call fantasy or what other people call reality, and look at these tales of the fantastic and try to chronicle the different mythological and symbolic subtexts, and try to read them as allegory, which they most often are able to be read as allegory. You can take the surface literalist interpretation of what was presented to you, and there's so many filters in between this thing, this alien other, whatever it is, and our experiencing of it. I mean, everything we experience goes through this filter here, and we only have the basic understanding of how that works. So it's really tough to see how maybe an actual message from an actual alien might be perceivable within the noise, the signal noise of our own unconscious expectations and projections. And I think that's what Strieber, and that's why I think Strieber is a good example. Yeah. He's looked at his experiences and go, well, I can take them on a surface literalist interpretation, but then again, he's had other, in his new book, he talks about, a being that he had ongoing contact with on a daily basis that was helping him meditate and so forth. And if anything, it sounds more like a spirit, and most people would call it a demon because it would look like a shadow. But he gained some incredible insights by just kind of throwing down the what are they, and I mean, still thinking about the many possibilities, but trying to see how are they affecting him, how are they affecting people who, all the people who are having these experiences. And it does seem to be kind of a catalyst for social movements, in that it's as if these intelligences are trying to shoot in and to inject new information, new myths into society, and hoping one of them will catch. Now, right now, one of them does seem to have caught, and that's the myth of these guys. You all know them. You all know these guys.
Yes.
I mean, I don't know how. I wonder if there's anybody out there that you can show that image to, and you won't go, "Ooh, what is that?" Most people are going to go, "Oh yeah, those are those little aliens that are doing probes on people and stuff," and that image really has taken off. And
so what is it? What was that T-shirt? That's a company name?
This is an artist named Bill Barker. Started a very profitable line of
Xenon Coded.
Xenon Coded. He calls basically this series and that face are called schwa, SCHWA, as in the inverted upside down or reversed E in pronunciation within a dictionary. It's the indeterminate the basically, and it can be in almost any word. And perhaps he meant that to imply some sort of metaphor to the phenomena that it's indeterminate.
So is there an actual product, or it's just a...
It's a ton of products. He got baseball caps, shirts, and he does these stick figure cartoons that feature these images and little UFOs, and the stick people are us, always getting our minds bent by this phenomenon. And he has basically created a very popular, recognizable image that is now, ever since he came out, I mean, there's always been marketing of UFO material, but right now it's just at a height, and there's just so many
business opportunities.
Yeah, you want to make a buck, start selling UFO stuff. But it's really weird, I mean, because when we go to a UFO conference and there's people talking about these traumatic experiences they're having, and then you go next door to the dealer's room, and there's UFO books, but there's also people selling UFO jewelry and Little, like we got at the last conference, we had these chocolate saucers with little green chocolate men in them, and for somebody who's had a really traumatic experience, this could be kind of considered,
almost perverse.
Perverse, yeah. I mean, there's guys selling belt buckles and alien belt buckles.
Right. Oh, there we go. We went on again. By the way, I just had to mention that, of course, Wednesday, the day wasn't really Wednesday. Wednesday's Mercury Day. You realize that?
Right. And I only recently realized that when a researcher, a friend of mine who's a folklorist who's into Mayan culture as well as Haitian voodoo, he was here in town for the conference I was just talking about, and we were sitting around talking about all these theories that we'd only been writing to each other about because it was the first time we'd met, and the thing we talked about were cycles and certain synchronicities like synchronicities with the sound that UFOs often make and spontaneous fires, all this weird stuff. And we were talking about the cyclicness of the Wednesday phenomenon, which apparently is slowly moving further in the week, so it's getting closer to Thursday. But yeah, it was like I was looking through a thing on Gemini, which I am, and it was like day of the week, Wednesday, Mercury.
Wednesday,
and I went, oh my God, because Mercurial,
hermeneutic,
that is the phenomenon. This phenomena is like Hermes. It is the liaison between the heavens and the kingdom of man and humanity. And this phenomena, whether it be the entities or the craft themselves, have this quicksilver nature. You can never grasp them, whether it be in a physical sense. I mean, there are people who've talked about touching them, and maybe they did. But in terms of apprehending the phenomena and its meaning, it's very much like quicksilver through the fingers. And when I realized, the conjunction of Wednesday, that being its main day, at least in the modern era, that was very interesting.
Very interesting. God, it's almost like we scripted this. This is just, I mean, there's so many. But we didn't even know. But let me just quickly touch, we only have a couple more minutes, but there was also a fascinating thing here on you reviewed Michael Talbot's Holographic Universe. And first of all, check out Alphen's Fest in Space. Where can we get it?
There might be a couple of copies left at Fringeware Incorporated.
Fringeware.
If you know where that is.
And if you go there and they don't have any more left, and you say,
demand
a copy, demand a copy. Go to Fringeware and demand a copy of Alphen's Fest in Spaces. If nothing else, you can get to write us at P.O. Box 1771. Austin 78767, P.E.A.C.E., and you should be writing us for many reasons because there's incredible stuff on this show. Please write in. If you have somebody who you think should be on this show, also write us in. We can always find a way to get you a copy, so check it out. But Holographic Universe, along with Stanislav Graf's Holotropic Mind, great stuff. Michael Talbot apparently is no longer... He died recently.
Right. That was one of the many revelations in Whitley Strieber's latest book. And in Strieber's book, he talks about how his perspectives were influenced by his friend Michael Talbot, who I didn't know until reading Strieber's book, had died of cancer.
Oh, I know.
Michael Talbot basically was writing about the new physics and the holographic universe paradigm, which has its origins in the holographic model of memory. And it was a really progressive paradigm in that it basically implies that, like quantum physics, there is the implicate order, that there is the whole of reality. Everything you can imagine, and probably more, is everywhere, everywhen, but nowhere and nowhen.
No.
And he links it with all these weird phenomena as that, everything from stigmata to UFO abductions and near-death experiences. He links these as evidence for this paradigm.
Yeah.
He was really good friends with Whitley Strieber and had an encounter at Whitley Strieber's cabin that is one of the most hysterical but very haunting scenarios that you could read about. That was one of the revelations, was that Strieber was such good friends with him, and also that he had this experience, and also that apparently at about the moment of Michael's death, Strieber had, I guess, what you would call a long-distance death dedication. He was walking down his hall, saw all this black smoke, and saw a luminous being like stepping through or some such, and he just felt it was Michael, and it had to do with Michael. And he shortly found out that he had died.
Where was this chronicled?
In Whitley Strieber's new book, Breakthrough, which is very much a breakthrough. It's his best book on the phenomenon, and if you're a non-believer, it's not going to convince you. If you have an open mind, it'll just strengthen your probable feeling that there's more to the universe than meets the eye.
We're about to go off. If you have stayed with us this whole program, you must have an open mind. Thank you, Miles. We'll definitely have you back again.
Thank you. Fascinating
stuff. Elf-infested spaces.
See you around.
Peace.
Welcome to the Comics Connection. It's the 14th installment of your